Thank you for the invitation, Elmer. It's always nice to be here. First slide is to show the Sami reindeer herding in Scandinavia. The second slide is to see history. What have we as Sami people experienced from research? And I'm trying to compare it between Sweden and Norway to get a good picture. And the third is actually what is happening today and what kind of suggestions I have, or what do we need to work better to the future. So if we're looking at the first map, we can see that Scandinavia is full of reindeer herding areas. You see all these borders. This is Sweden, this is Finland, and then we have Norway on the side. The government has made borders in Scandinavia. And the borders, of course, they will be used to prevent reindeer from passing on from Sweden to Norway, for example, or from Finland that is totally closed. But my point is to show that there is no area in Scandinavia up in the north that is not reindeer herding area. So all research stations are actually situated on reindeer herding area where there are some local communities that has all the Sami names for the rivers, for the mountains, for the mountain slopes, whatever. So the Sami language is alive and it describes the nature. So if we go to the next slide and we see what has been, in my point of view, what has been happening. So if you go back to the beginning of 18th century or the beginning of the 19th century, we see that the Sami people were using this land totally freely, almost independently from the government. But we know that research has always been a tool for politicians. So in the Sami case, politicians ordered, but they gave money to researchers. They gave money to universities to prove that the land actually belongs to the government, not to the Sami. Because Sami cannot handle the land. That was the statement of the Swedish government. If you go back to 1883. So they actually, the university said that if Sami people should work freely, or the borders, like when the border was closed between Sweden and Finland, it will be a case of damage to the land. Overgrazing will happen. Sami people do not know the best for their future. So in one way, researchers or research institutes were used to be a tool for the government. If we continue upwards in 1925, for example, then Sweden had this race biological university, or they had this to prove that the government really owns the land, not the Sami people. That's why they put up researchers, anthropologists, and race biologists up to the north where I come from, to prove that actually Sami people are not as clever as the white people. The white person is the best. That's why Sami people cannot own land, because all the lands up in the north were owned by Sami. So the Reindeer Herding Act of 1928 is a result actually of research. Research is used as a tool to make legislation. Then we can see that it happened quite similarly between Sweden and Norway, but we see a big change after the Second World War. We see that Swedish authorities really, they haven't been destroyed by the war. They're still really eager to get more iron from the iron ore up in Kiruna. So they go in efficiently and takes the universities as a proof of how to control land. The land government is not good enough with Sami people. If we follow the red dots, you can see that the Norwegian line. We can always have some interruption with technology. It's not so bad. Then we see that the Norwegian Reindeer Herding Act in 1976. There we have the big thing in Norway, the Hardini's theory, tragedy of commons, overgrazing again. And this overgrazing idea that researchers really could convince the politicians that will happen if the government doesn't go in and control reindeer herding. So actually, since 1976, Norway have had a totally state-governed reindeer herding. If we jump forward to see the IPCC report, then we are starting to see something positive. Then it's actually stated from the researchers that actually indigenous people in the Arctic, they have knowledge. And they have knowledge that could actually be a part of finding good mitigation efforts to mitigate the climate change negative effects of it. And if we are looking at what has happened on the Swedish side, is that we have strengthened this collaboration between Sami communities and the research community. We can see that I heard just a week ago that in Abisko research station, there are Sami people, local Sami people invited to the board of science boards. I think that's something like that. But what we see is that we are doing something much more positive now than we have been done earlier. But the question that will arise then is that what are we doing and how can we do it better? We know that single researchers, they don't have the need, or if you're not interested in Sami people, you're interested in, if you're natural science, biologist, why did you want to talk with somebody else? You are wanting to do something with the nature. So then we have to take the third slide to see what has been done with Sami. If we are looking at the Sami Council, how they are working, how they are thinking, and how they collaborate. And we can see that they have this new Nuala Akorjuk. There's like a guidance for researchers and indigenous communities how to collaborate. And they are thinking that the best way would be to build up a three-step, a way of collaborating. The first is to have, in one way, how to interpret words that are said, like what is co-creation, how can we talk about these old ways of looking at the white man versus indigenous persons? How could we have a dictionary of explaining the framework, the foundation of the concept, to talk about the same thing, to understand the same thing? Then we can see that they are talking about the ground research and context. In this context, the Sami Council have made their own SUDA principle. It's about who should have the access for data. The CARE principle, care and fair, that's a very large upper framework. And then you have the Inuit or the First Nations that made them, and the Sami has a very specific geographically made for our area. That's SUDA, Sami way of saying that what should we share and what kind of data should we protect. And then we can talk about the implementation of this new law. It's a project, but this guideline. And the implementation gives ideas of how to start the dialogue, how to talk with, to explain, for example, this free, prior, informed consent. What does it mean in the research context? So it's a good guidance for researchers and communities. But what I would want to give to the panel and to you as listening here, what do we need from an indigenous perspective? I would say that we need a duty of research consultation in Sami areas. We need it must be a duty for research institutes to consult Sami areas when they start starting different types of projects. It's not just to say that they send an email and say that this is the project that we are starting to do now, but really have a dialogue about it, that we are doing this. And on that way, if it would be a duty for the research stations to do it, not for the single researcher, then we actually could say that this is something that must be taken seriously. And we could then have an input in an early stage in different projects. And that will also, the second thing, that is the structure of the research collaboration. And of course, if we make structures, then it would be easier to get them to be permanent. And I would say that one structure would be that how could we, start to get more indigenous researchers, more indigenous youth to become interested in natural research. And that would not be obligation for the community, but that would be something that research stations should actually take a big responsibility to tell about the work, to really recruit indigenous researchers into research. And I think that these two things would be something that I would like that this panel discussed. Is the need to have a duty of research consultation in some areas? And what kind of structures should we have that secures collaborations? Thank you for that. I should not take more time.